Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel Cook, and I am the owner of Cook DFW Roofing. And I am here today to go over some necessity home ownerships. And a lot of times people don't remember what all it takes to own a home and the maintenance that it might need. And that's why we have developed this show. I'm wanting to educate everyone and make everyone aware of some items that will help increase and sustain the value of your home. I'm here today with Lyndon Wilson, the creator of Thedifference, and he's going to be helping me just go over some items that may not be thought about very often, and to educate some of the things that we all need to be aware of. So, Lyndon, are you there?
I'm here, man. How's it going?
All right, doing wonderful. Thank you, man.
First of all, I just want to say I'm excited about the show that you're putting together, Daniel, for so many reasons. I've been around the real estate industry for over 20 years, and I've had these discussions with a lot of real estate agents, and I think that it's so critical for new homeowners and existing homeowners to understand what goes into owning a home, not just buying a home, right? Not just buying and selling, but the actual ownership part, because that's the longest term that you have. The buying process is short, relatively short. Selling process can be relatively short, but the living process, can be 3, 5, 8, maybe longer years. And through my experience, I've watched so many people. Your objective not only is to have a home that you can feel comfortable in, that your family feels comfortable in, you raise them, but it's also a good investment for you. And that's why I think your show is going to be so valuable for so many people, because at the end of the day, when we get ready to leave one home and go to another, it's very, very important that we have maximized the equity in that home. And maintenance on a home can help us do that in ways that a lot of people really don't understand or figure out. So we talked a little bit about this before the show, and so I felt like that it would be great for us to start off, and let's just talk about kind of the seasons, right? You've got, right now we're in the spring season. We'll talk a little bit about what some of the maintenance responsibilities are during the spring season, the summer season, the fall, and then the winter. And then as we move through the series of shows you're going to be doing, each season, we will break that down a little bit more in detail. And I know you've talked about bringing on some other guests to talk and share their thoughts and experiences as well. So let's just talk now. Let's talk about the spring season. If I'm a first-time homeowner, or I've got an existing home, what are some things that I really need to be thinking about as far as maintenance and just the overall health of my home?
Sure. Okay, so spring is a very important time. That's usually after the winter time, the cold months. Everybody's been stuck inside the house, haven't done a lot around the perimeter of their home, haven't gone outside. One of the first things we need to discuss is inside air. And so we need to have a set plan on changing our HVAC filters. And my suggestion, just because of the area that we live in with all the high winds and dust, I would say at least once every 3 months, you should have your AC filters changed out. And there's a number of different options as far as AC filters, as far as the MERV rating. There's 9s, 11s, 13s. I think there's a 20. So it just depends on the density of the actual fabric that the air is going through, and that's how much it traps versus the pollen, the dust, the dog dander, those type of things. So inside air, change out on a quarterly basis is super important. Especially if anybody in your family has allergies or any contagions that irritate their lungs or their overall day-to-day functions. So first and foremost, change out your AC filter and get a schedule. Set it on your cell phone. Make it a calendar. If it's April 1st, whatever it is, or March 1st, and then 90 days from there. But that's the first thing inside the house.
Okay,
next thing is,
I want to ask a couple questions on that, because I think that's really, really important. Number one, for a lot of us, sometimes we forget. I know you said set the alerts and everything on your phone, but there are some services out there that will actually do this not only for you, but they actually send you those filters at those pre-planned times. Or have you any experience with those?
Yes, actually, I was just in the middle of trying to start a program with Homestock. Homestock is a local program. He basically has it set up to where he sends the filters to you, and he does it on any type of quarterly basis, every semi-monthly basis, every 6 months. So he's got a great program as far as that goes, because it tries to keep where the customer doesn't have to remember to do it. Once you receive the filter on your front porch, you're like, oh yeah, it's time to change the filter out. So yes,
Right.
that is a good program, and there are a lot of them out there. That's grown because everybody understands how busy the homeowner is now these days. So if it's a service that just tries to help the homeowner and take advantage of it if you can. I mean, definitely it's good. I mean, realistically, we probably all go to Lowe's or Home Depot at least once or twice a month. So it's not like we can't get a filter, but it's just something that you have to be very diligent about as far as making sure that you remember to do.
Okay. So one other question, and I'll let you move into the next thing you were going to talk about. I know that you know when we talk about car maintenance, changing your oil, changing the filters, changing the air filter, helps with the efficiency of that car, helps with the gas mileage, so it keeps your fuel bills lower than what you know, in more of an optimal range. Is that true also with kind of like your air conditioning and HVAC filters? I mean, does that help that run more efficiently and then therefore save you electricity?
Yes, absolutely does. Anytime I've talked to several HVAC gentlemen, and that's the number one thing they say they find in majority of their house calls. Somebody will call them in because something's happened to their HVAC, and the first thing they look at is their filter, and it's dirty 75% of the time, which causes restriction, which causes more uh, you know harshness as far as the compressor and the condenser and everything working together, and that ventilation of the air is critical. So it has to have a
Yeah.
smooth, constant ventilation.
Okay, I do have one more question, then I'll let you move into the next one. Um, when that filter becomes kind of restricted or it gets clogged or you haven't changed it out, is that not one of the causes also of your air conditioner unit freezing up, what they call freezing up, and then that makes that condenser run harder and everything else run harder? Do I have that right or am I wrong on that?
No, you're exactly correct. Freezing up is a very common issue, especially with a dirty air filter. A side effect of that is if you've been around the side of your home and you see a water leaking from the outside of a pipe that's sticking outside your soffit area somewhere around your home, that's your backup drain line draining that excessive water content that you have, in your HVAC system, and it's so much that it can't go down the primary line. Or your primary line stopped up because you have a lot of mold and a lot of elements that's causing the drain line to get clogged up because you have so much water moisture coming in there. So that is a very common issue, and freezing up can cause several larger problems, because if that pan gets so much moisture built into it, then you can allow that to run out into your attic flooring or wherever your AC unit is, your drain pan, which can cause water damage to the area around. Unless what you have, it's called a float switch, which a float switch you install onto your pan, and that shuts the actual AC off if it senses too much water in your drain pan. So that
Wow.
is a
Okay.
item that you can purchase, and it really does help, especially for older AC units.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, I'll let you go on now to the next thing that we need to be thinking about during the spring season on maintenance.
Sure. Well, spring outside, like we said, you've been inside your house for several months and you haven't been paying attention to anything. It's really time to start going around the perimeter of your home and look and see how your uh, slab looks, as far as you see any major cracks in it. If you see any large gaping holes, the homes are constructed differently now. Some of them have a smaller slab that's actually being seen from the ground, and they have what's called weep holes. And some of them have larger slabs that actually develop cracks, especially on the corners and around some of the areas that may have some traffic around them. So that's something that's very important to start looking at. And not all cracks mean that you have a foundation problem, but it is a good thing to start, evaluating and make sure before they start growing, or if you start noticing excessive items inside the home, also like not shutting the doors correctly, or you start seeing cracks in your sheetrock. So that could be just a side effect on the outside as well.
Okay.
Another item that you want to do
Window,
is,
windows having a hard time shutting too. That's another thing,
yeah,
right?
Window casings get just tweaked a little bit by 1/2 inch, and you will have a harder time closing that window. So it doesn't take a lot. I know people, think in their mind that, this has to be substantial. It really doesn't. There's an old saying: if you could stick a matchbook into a crack, that's too much, basically. So, and if that changes, also that's a good guideline to know if those cracks are getting larger. So, but it happens pretty fast. I've seen some
Daniel, you mentioned obviously that's a springtime check that maintenance check we want to be thinking about, but are there any seasons, any times of the year where you're going to see more shift with your foundation, or is it just kind of constant throughout the year based on, I guess, your precipitation and things like that, right?
Well, I mean, there's one thing that you can definitely do as far as keeping your yard at a constant moisture level. That's the most important thing you can do, and it calls for both sides. So when we have heavy rains, you want to have a good gutter system and water diversion, so it doesn't sit around and pool around your house and start washing some of that soil away from your house. And then the opposite side, when we're getting those hot, dry summer days for those 60, 70 days in a row, it's very important to keep your sprinklers and a soaker system around your base of your house, because if you don't, you'll go out and you can see cracks 2-3 inches wide around your property, and all that's doing is allowing the foundation to have the ability of moving a lot easier than if the soil was consistent as far as the amount of moisture it has in it.
Okay. Daniel was actually out by my house the other day. He was looking at some projects that I've got going. I don't know if you noticed that soaker hose out there on the side of the house, Daniel, when you were talking to me about the sprinklers. But yeah, that's one of the things that we're really aware of, because Texas is anybody that's ever walked across a dry field or a dry yard here in Texas and starts to see the cracks develop, then you understand what's going on underneath your house.
Oh yes.
What else do we have in the springtime? So we talked about our AC and the need to make sure that the filters are changed. We're talking about the foundation. What else are some things that we need to really be aware of in the springtime?
Well, the most important thing probably for your yard is to make sure you check all your sprinklers. There's a lot of stuff that can happen to them, and you haven't had them on probably in 3 or 4 months. So you need to do a test cycle on all your zones. Make sure that they're still have the pointed directory toward the yard, to the grass, not to the sidewalks and garages. You need to make sure they're actually working properly. There hasn't been a year gone by that I've not had at least one sprinkler head that I've had to change out after wintertime. So it's super important to get your sprinklers checked out and make sure that they're still functioning correctly.
Okay. Well, anything else?
Yeah, I would say recommending checking around your exterior home, windows, see if they're sealed still, see if you saw any gaps. Humidity level or moisture buildup in your windows typically could be a sign of a bad window casing. Sometimes the glazing of the windows has failed. And so those are things to start identifying that you may have to have some repairs done to your windows. And going from winter to summer is a perfect time to do that before it gets super hot. Because if you can get all those, repairs fixed, then of course your temperatures will stay more accurate inside your home and your bills will be a lot lower. So inspecting windows, inspecting caulking around the outsides, doors, all that starts to fail through time. And so it's a really good time to go start around and looking at those items.
Okay. So moving out of the spring into the summer, which I guess we'll be hitting that pretty soon. I'm not trying to rush it at all here in Texas. But what are some things then once we go from spring into summer? What are some things? I mean, would still, I guess, be checking that air conditioner filter, because that's going into another quarter, probably 3 months later. So that's obviously that's just going to be something that's standard. What are some other things that we want to think about during the summer months or the summer season that we need to really think about maintaining on our homes?
Well, it depends on what your home has, but I mean, pools, of course, we're getting ready for pool season, which probably, by May, a lot of people have already jumped in their pool probably around here. So, but pools are a critical item to keep maintained. The equipment is very costly, and if you wait for it to fail, it's going to at the worst time that you want it to. So, checking your pool equipment to make sure it doesn't have any leaks, checking to make sure that the balance in all the water is and everything is correct. You have the right amount of, chemicals in there, not too much, not too little. But annual pool service is very critical. I know a lot of people around here have weekly, bi-weekly, and monthly pool service, and they mostly focus on the chemicals. But cleaning those filters out often, make sure that those things, stay in good circulation. Make sure all your valves and everything don't have major leaks in it. Make sure your pool equipment is covered if all possible. Having your pool equipment covered is critical so the sun does not bake it and start cracking it, and really helps the longevity of the equipment. So pools and anything around a pool, people have even above ground pools. Those items need to be checked as well. So just not just
Right.
in ground pools, above ground pools. So
Okay.
very important item around here.
So you would recommend then, before you really crank that pool up, to have someone come out, kind of like and service it, or at least check everything out, make sure that there's no unexpected surprises once you flip that switch and get everything running, right?
Absolutely. Yep. Very important.
Okay. So that's kind of, a lot of the things that you talked about in the spring will carry over each quarter. So you got that in summer, and then we go into fall. Let's talk a little bit about the fall and what we would need to be considering as far as our preventative maintenance and just protecting our homes moving into the fall season. What's some things that you would recommend then or suggest?
Well, one thing we haven't talked about yet, and this is kind of a household decision, and not many people do this. Your hot water heater is something a lot of people forget about, and a lot of homes have gone to tankless water heaters, which is a nice option to have if you have those. But for the majority of us that still have a traditional hot water heater, that hot water heater is supposed to be drained fully at least one time a year. And so you'll need to make a decision on what part of the year do you want to drain that hot water heater. When's it going to be the less inconvenience? Maybe is it a good time to do it in fall or spring? One or the other. Obviously, when we don't need that much hot water, I wouldn't do it in the wintertime, obviously. I want my hot water. And I probably wouldn't necessarily do it, probably early spring or late fall either. I would probably say somewhere, summertime could be an optimal time, or beginning of fall, maybe getting ready for the necessity of your hot water. Because if you don't, that's going to deteriorate the inside of that lining of the hot water heater faster, because those minerals will sit in there and corrode the inside of that, and causing it to have emergency failure sometimes. So that's a critical thing to start looking at, is at least once a year draining the hot water heater.
And if anybody's ever had any issue with a water heater, which I have, it creates a major problem once that thing fails, because now you've got water damage everywhere, and usually you're not going to be sitting there when it happens. It's it's going to be at a time where you're not home, or it's at night.
It's going to be at the worst time you could want it. It's going to be at 3 a.m. in the morning, or it's going to be on a weekend when you're at the fishing at the lake, and you get a call from your next door neighbor that says, "Wow, you have a lot of water coming out the base of your garage for the door." So, yes.
Right. So let me ask this other question. What about the popping of a hot water heater? What is that? Because I know I've had several people talk to me about that before, but they'll hear their hot water heater popping a little bit. Is that just the air bubbles releasing inside that heater, or is that something to be concerned about?
Well, what I've been told before from some plumbers, it's the makeup of how the water heater is made. Some of them have like a little valve that you can flip up and down to relieve pressure off periodically if you feel like that's happening. But some of them have like an automatic, valve that releases pressure built up from a sensor that they have built into the lines. Now, I don't think that's very common. I think they still are manual for the majority of it all. But also the thermostat, as it kicks on and off, you'll hear some noise from your gas, especially gas systems. Now, electrical, I don't think I hear as much, but from gas systems, you'll hear that popping and crinkling of that thermostat heating up and causing that flame. You'll hear almost a flame burning, of getting that tank to a registered, temperature. And it's super important to keep that thermostat also in certain times that you're not going to use it at a lower level, and that way it won't have to turn on and off as much. It won't have as much, clicking also.
Okay. All right. So we've talked a little bit about the spring. We've talked about the summer. As I said before, as we go through more of these shows, we'll get into more details on each specific thing so people understand that more. We talked about the fall. Let's talk now about the winter. Moving into the winter, obviously we're not using, well, in Texas, you do use the AC in winter around here. So still thinking about those filters, but what are some other things that maybe people don't think about that they need to be looking into going into the winter months here?
Yeah. Furnace preventive maintenance is super critical. It's definitely easy, especially if you have a gas house, to have a carbon monoxide leak because your furnace is not inspected properly. So that does happen. Also, even with electrical furnaces, you want to make sure you're checking those out and having a certified, preventive maintenance technician come out and check to make sure that all the sensors, all the wiring, everything is all connected correctly. The furnace is definitely one of the most important things to have checked in your home. Um, Also, something we haven't talked about too, and this is important, especially in the winter months, probably. Uh, you know, Checking the batteries in your smoke detectors is super critical, and as well as a carbon monoxide tester. We would recommend every home having that. A lot of homes don't, and it's the silent killer because it's just that word. If you have a carbon monoxide leak in your home and you don't really know it, and unfortunately, people go to sleep at night and they never wake up.
Right.
And it's a simple thing. It's a $25 item that you can put near, somewhere that's going to be the first place that the carbon monoxide is going to get to, and that will go off saving your life. So that's definitely an important item to have.
And then when you mentioned the smoke detectors and changing the batteries out on that, it's just, it never ceases to amaze me how strategic those alarms are at going off when the batteries go out at night after midnight. That's usually when they start the little beeping noise, letting you know that it's time to change them. So we've got that on our calendar because I hate being woken up at night and with that thing going off and either having to change it or figure out what to do. Um, Daniel, what else do you have for us as far as home maintenance? I mean, we talked about the seasons. Is there obviously you do roofing? How often should you have your roof checked?
Well, that's a super important question, and it depends on the age of your roof, and it depends on what kind of weather systems you may have at your property. At the bare minimum, we suggest a one time a year annual inspection on your roof and all the structures that are around your roof, meaning your ventilation, your pipe jack flashings, any kind of counter flashings around your chimney, where some siding may meet some of the roof lines. And then during that process, of course, we're inspecting all the shingles to make sure there's none of them are loose or missing, or any of those items. So at least once a year, but it's highly recommended twice a year if you know you've had a lot of wind or heavy rain, or if you even had some minor hailstorms at your address. Twice a year is not that big of a deal, and it's a very important item to have before you start having substantial leaks going into your attic. But then by the time you see them inside your home, they've been doing that way for months upon months, because that's realistically how long it takes for a leak to get inside your house. Is usually a couple of months before it has actually started. So yeah,
Yep.
roof inspections probably the most easiest item you can have inspected that will cause the most amount of damage.
So when you're talking about roof inspections, I mean, it's not just getting on top of the house and checking the shingles out. Do you guys actually go up into the attic and do an inspection from underneath so that you can see any leaks if it was leaking?
So it depends on the scenario again. If we got onto a brand new roof that's only been on the house for 1 or 2 years, we do not see any physical conditions that's going to make us think there's a leak there, then no, we're not going to do that. If a customer says, hey, you know what, I believe we may have a water leak, or if we get up on a roof and we start seeing a large area of shingles missing, ridge missing, counter flashing, looks to have some heavy rust lines on it, then that's where we would let that customer know, hey, these are some side effects that we're seeing from the top. Would you mind us getting inside the attic and see if we see any water entering the property yet? So just definitely depends on the scenario.
Okay. Well, we don't have many minutes left. This has gone pretty fast, but I do want to add, you did mention the chimney, and we don't see that very often around here. I mean, but what about getting your chimney cleaned, once a year, making sure that chimney sweep comes out, or making sure that you maintain the clean chimney?
So it depends on use. So I actually knew a gentleman that used to do this, and he said for homeowners that only used it maybe 3 to 5, 10 times or less during a season, they could probably go every 2 or 3 years without really having to clean it. But if you're a high use chimney person and you really love that chimney, once a year is super important because it will build up a lot of silt and it can cause some major problems with fire catching inside the chimney casing. So yes.
Right. Yeah, that creosote is highly flammable once it gets to the right flash point, I guess. And I had a friend when I was in high school. It was his family. They lost their home because of a chimney that caught on fire. And I mean, they heard this roaring. Everything looked in the fireplace looked normal, but all of a sudden, you know, the smoke started, and that's what had happened, is that chimney caught fire. So, well, Daniel, a great show today. I'm looking forward to many more of these, and it's, you know, us drilling down more on these things and talking a little bit, and maybe possibly sharing some cost and some savings, and you know what that can relate to over time, as far as you know, how it can help a homeowner build that equity within their home. But I'm going to let you close this out. Tell everybody how to get in touch with you. It's been scrolling at the bottom, but we want to let everybody know how to get in touch with you. I'll let you close it out, and then we'll get ready for the next show.
All right, sounds great, Lyndon. Well, phone number is very easy, folks. It's 833-COOK-DFW, or you can reach me by email at daniel@cookdfw.com. And anytime you have any questions, anything, just feel free to give us an email or shout, and we would definitely love to help you out.